Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Atheist Experience. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
Today is Sunday, January 31st, 2016. We are a live call-in, internet-based atheist TV show broadcasting from Austin, Texas, dedicated to positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You can catch us live every Sunday on YouTube or Ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience.com. You can provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP, or you can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. If you enjoy this show, please check out the related podcast, The Non-Profits, which is currently airing on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. You can find links at the Atheist Experience website, and the next Non-Profits will be recorded live on February 3rd. That is this Wednesday. As always, the cast and crew of the Atheist Experience will be going to dinner after the show at Threadgill's North location, 6416 North Lamar. We'll be arriving around 6:30 p.m. or so. How are you doing today, Tracie?
Doing well.
You guys can queue up Jamar from Buffalo. I have one special announcement to make. 2 weeks from yesterday, the Saturday, February 13th, from noon to 5 p.m., the Center for Inquiry of Austin will be presenting a free event to celebrate the 207th anniversary of Darwin's birth and his contributions to science. I am wearing an event t-shirt.
There you go.
Thanks, Steve. There will be something for everyone, learning activities for children and teens, fascinating lectures and trivia contests for adults, and professional development credit for teachers. Darwin's birthday is celebrated around the world, but in Austin, we celebrate it with an accent, y'all, and Darwin gets to wear a cowboy hat. So you can order Don't Mess with Darwin t-shirts at cfi-austin.org. If you want to know what's going on, there's going to be a bunch of talks, like board member Claire Wellner for the Atheist Community of Austin is going to be giving a couple of talks on evolution, including talking about morality from an evolutionary perspective. And there's also going to be activities for kids, like a fossil dig and a scavenger hunt and a photo op with Darwin, I guess. Okay. Anyway, sounds like a good time. So
it does.
Let's go for our first caller. This does not bode well.
Oh, be positive.
Yes, wait. Jamar, are you there? Jamar, can you hear me? Oh, no, yes? All right, we're going with the headphone solution.
Alrighty. We came prepared.
Just so you know, last time when I was on the show with Neil Carter, I actually forgot that we use headphones now. But this time, they had a speaker which supposedly worked last week, but not now. Jamar, can you hear me?
I'm here.
All right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very muffled. Wait.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Or is that just my headphones?
I can hear Jamar.
Are you hearing him clearly?
I mean, I can understand what he's saying.
Hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
I hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can
Yeah,
hear
I
you.
hear you.
What's up? Jamar,
Speak.
say something.
Now I hear music.
Okay, is he just playing music at us? Okay.
Jamar, do you have a comment or question?
Jamar, if you have something to ask it
Okay,
now or we're
sorry.
hanging up.
This is the video is kind of delayed. Stuff I said like 2 seconds.
I don't know. Hang up. Next caller. Oliver from Manchester. Guys, hang up. I don't need that. Okay, we're going to go next to Oliver from Manchester. Anyway, what's going on with you this week, Tracie?
Just celebrating for Planned Parenthood.
Yes, Planned Parenthood. Okay, so you want to like talk about it, or you want me to?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to have cake. It's like that. It's just they, it was an absolute witch hunt. Videos were invented, and things were spliced and added, and it was just a bunch of crazy. And then all these politicians who should have known better didn't really look at the evidence and instead decided to just use it as their springboard to launch harassment against Planned Parenthood because
so
that's what their
Carly
constituents
Fiorina,
want.
in an official Republican debate, said that she had personally seen a video of something about baby parts.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen. They claimed that the people who filmed this video secretly claimed that the Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
did not happen.
Right. What happens is that, yes, there is fetal tissue that can transfer legally, and yes, there are fees involved. It's not done for free. I mean, there are fees involved, but that is different than selling baby parts, right?
The fees involved basically involve paying for shipping and the cost of.
Right.
These things are basically donated to science, right? Yeah.
It's kind of like
Which
the
is
difference.
legal.
Well, like if you were, for example, to purchase cable, right?
Right.
You have the cost for the cable that they sold you, but then when they come out and they hook it up and they do, it's like you pay a fee for the box, you pay a fee for the hookup and stuff like that, but that's not the cable that you're buying, right? The cable that you actually buy is usually got like a monthly cost. You're paying like $100 a month for all these channels. That's selling cable. But the cost to have somebody come out there and hook it up is just covering the fee for the hookup. There's a difference between a fee and selling something to someone. Covering a cost that is incurred in order to provide something is one thing.
Well, anyway, Planned Parenthood was accused of doing all kinds of illegal stuff, and there was an investigation, and the grand jury, which came together to determine whether this Houston Planned Parenthood was selling organs, not only didn't indict them, but actually turned around and indicted the people who were filming the video under false pretenses and wasting a bunch of people's time by lying about what the video said. And as an added bonus, which is pretty hilarious, which to me is one of my favorite parts about this story, these people were undercover asking if Planned Parenthood to sell them organs. Well, it turns out that buying organs is also illegal.
Right.
And they were like, well, we weren't really going to buy it. We just said we were so we could trick them into, just telling us they sold them. But no, it turns out that it's still illegal to try to buy organs.
Right.
So they're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. And it's just, the other interesting thing to me is that even with Planned Parenthood being cleared, I think it was 11 states the last time I heard that had ended their investigations, cleared Planned Parenthood. We still have one ongoing in Texas because we don't care about reality here. Mm-hmm. So they had these these things that they're investigating, and then when they found out that there was no wrongdoing, then the politicians, because they couldn't let that go, they had to say, well, it may be legal, but this just seems really unethical, and maybe we need to pass some laws about if this is what's going on. And it's like, you know what? You're the legislators. So if there's a problem with the laws that are currently in effect, guess who's responsible for those laws?
Yeah, but don't encourage them.
Well, I'm just saying that if you're going to sit there and say that that they did everything legally, but oh my gosh, these laws represent like an unethical framework, and then what? You're going to blame Planned Parenthood? They didn't write the laws. It's like if you don't like your own laws, it's not Planned Parenthood's fault.
Yeah,
you wrote the laws in such a way.
Careful what you wish for, because they'll do it.
I'm not wishing for something. I'm simply pointing out that their criticism that what was done legally was still somehow wrong or immoral or unethical reflects on them. If they believe there's a problem with it, they're the gatekeepers of the legislation. So you can't really point the finger at Planned Parenthood and say they're behaving in an unethical manner when you have written the laws in such a way that this is perfectly okay.
Sure.
It's like I guess it's just a thing about they need to point the finger at themselves if they're really going to stand up and say, oh, these are, this is horrendous that this is legal. It's like, yeah, who's responsible for, the law? Oh, yeah, that's right, you are.
Right.
But they don't want to look at it that way.
Okay. Oliver from Manchester. What are you guys doing back there? Wait,
is that them or is it the caller? I mean, is this
I don't know.
are these prank calls or is this
Help
the
us out,
controller?
guys. Are we getting prank calls who are playing music at us, or are you playing music by mistake over that phone? Can't hear you. I'm gonna need. Yeah. All right. Cue up somebody else, or leave Oliver on. Are we gonna have to ad-lib a whole show? That's kind of annoying.
I don't know.
Do you have anything going on with you?
No, it's really weird because I did have something like about a week ago, and then I just can't remember what it was. I just had something. I don't know, but
Okay. Well, something happened with the Ark Park last week.
uh-oh.
At this point, I welcome somebody opening the door and coming in and saying out loud what's going on with the phone lines. Anyway, let's see. Oh, okay. They put Oliver up to high priority, so I guess it is their end, maybe?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to read something about the Ark Park.
Do it.
Late yesterday afternoon, a federal judge in Kentucky
I hope
ruled...
you can hear me.
Oh,
Hey!
yes, I hear you now.
Was it Oliver? Is that the name?
Is this Oliver?
I don't see the name list. Wait a second. There's the call list.
Oliver.
Is that
Can you hear me? Oliver.
I heard him. I know I heard him.
I did, yes. All right. If somebody else hears us talking to you right
I'm on
now...
now.
There he
Can
is.
anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you. Can you hear us? Maybe that's the problem.
I don't think he can hear us.
Ah, okay.
Live internet TV.
Well, this is the first time I've had, these kinds of caller problems. So
This is the first time? You
Yeah.
are so lucky.
yeah, in the new studios. This is
What's
really
up, Kevin?
interesting. Is that how it works?
Oh, okay. We left the speaker on.
Is that a problem?
Okay. Wait. Can you hear us now,
Can you message
Oliver?
join us so I can...
Oliver?
I don't think he hears you.
No.
Go on Atheist Experience on your iPad. You can listen to me.
I don't think Oliver can hear us.
You are on the air right now.
I don't think he knows.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
But he can't hear us telling him yes, so it doesn't matter.
All right. This is awesome.
Maybe he should maybe the control room should just tell him to state his question.
All right. So
I don't know what to do.
Rob Boston of Americans United put up a post on last week, January 26th, saying that late yesterday afternoon, a federal judge in Kentucky ruled that creationist Ken Ham's controversial Ark Park has a legal and constitutional right to receive a package of tax incentives from the state and thus the taxpayers. Oh, that's disappointing. You remember this story? Ken Ham was building a religious-themed amusement park where they were building a model of Noah's Ark, supposedly. And,
I wonder what is the logic here behind the taxpayer dollars going to fund this thing?
Well, they were like. So Ken Ham's organization was like, it's a tourist attraction. It will bring lots of money to the state. And the governor was like, okay,
wow.
sounds like a great idea to me and does not involve any
No.
constitutional conflict of any kind.
So what level was this judge? What is the ruling? Is
A
this
federal judge in Kentucky, I guess.
So it's a state, is it a state judge or
I think it sounds like a
saying-
state judge to me.
so the Kentucky, well,
Yeah.
federal.
So what happened was they were going to go ahead and get all their tax write-offs, but they were like posting a whole bunch of the usual nonsense that Christian employers do, where like you have to sign a statement of faith or you can't work for us, and that doesn't fly when you are taking government contracts. You have to not discriminate. So at that point, Kentucky was like, oh, we've made a terrible mistake. And they turned around and they said, I'm sorry, you have to change your employment policies or else you can't get this money. And they said, well, screw you. We're keeping our employment policies. And they did. And so the governor revoked the money.
Wow.
And then Ken Ham sued them. And apparently last week they got something.
Oh, I would take that to the next level.
I definitely would also.
Wow.
Let's see. So U.S. District Judge Gregory Van Tatenhove, an appointee of President Bush II, ruled that the tax incentive program is religiously neutral and that the Ark Encounter must be permitted to take part. And then Rob Boston does a lot of very reasonable editorializing, which is pretty much the same thing we would say. And that's at au.org on their blog from last week.
That is unbelievable. It's almost like saying, well, we have to be religiously neutral, so we're just going to start tax funding churches because we can't turn them down because, we're religiously neutral. It's like, this is an entirely religiously themed thing. It's not even like a private school that has a religious affiliation and there's some argument about what, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is like just full-on religion.
Right.
That's really wild.
No callers are marked as being on the line still. Somebody please give me a wave or give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if we are able to take calls at this point.
Oh, I do have a good one here.
We could just read the caller's topic and discuss it if we want to.
Hey, we got something.
We
got a thumbs up.
Okay, put somebody on. Anybody. Give me a blue line for whoever you're putting on. I guess we'll go back to Jamar, who I thought was trolling us the first time because we heard music.
And maybe he wasn't.
No, wait. Now we got a different person. No? Okay, what are you going to read?
Well, I don't know the date on this, so I feel a little bit weird reading it, but it was this really funny article. Archbishop says he didn't know it was criminal to have sex with children. And I read the article because I thought, oh, clearly that's...
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Wait, no.
No?
Wait, that was us.
Wait, I heard somebody. Is this Safi from London?
No, that's us echoing.
Oh.
It was us. It was our own voices. But yeah, this was a very wild thing that came up on my feed, and maybe it'll have a date when I get to the actual article. But it was... Actually, it was January, posted
Hello?
January 29th.
Okay,
Hello?
Safi, can you hear us? The caller still cannot hear us, guys.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Hello?
He's not able to hear us.
Nope.
Hello?
Can someone in the control room just tell him that...
I can hear you.
You can hear us?
Oh, did you
good.
just hear us now?
Hello, I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Okay. Hi. I hope he doesn't
Hello, I can hear you.
hear us from the feedback on the video stream, because that means he will be several seconds out of sync with us.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what's happening.
I have a question about...
Go! Gonna listen. Oh, great. This is a theist, too. We're gonna miss it.
Safi, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, guy. I have a question. Since I watched some of your videos, and you guys suggesting that there is no God, and like how could you possibly say that with no reason?
Oh, so we are going to have a lag of several seconds. I just finished hearing your question, and this isn't a great way to have a back and forth conversation. But in a nutshell, what was the question?
He wants to know how we can not believe in a God without evidence that there's no God. I think that's what he's asking.
Well, yeah, okay. And so
Hello?
I guess we're going to say our standard thing about burden of proof, which is basically that when you are making a claim, the impetus is on you
Hello?
to. Oh, that hurt.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, excellent. You want to start this over and just repeat your question?
Yeah, when I watched your video and
Yeah.
you guys telling that there is no God, so I want to know about the reason, like why there is no God, and how could you possibly say that there is no God and stuff like that?
The reasons that people present for believing in God are just not good. And the default position for is not to assume belief in something that hasn't been demonstrated. And that goes not only for gods, but for UFOs and unicorns and leprechauns and all
For
that
anything,
other stuff.
even for police. I mean, you wouldn't believe in them unless you had evidence that there were police.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
and
so
I do have evidence that there are
right.
police.
But the point is, I mean, it doesn't just go for claims that are disproven. Claims that are proven, you believe in them because of evidence as well.
Right.
So
The
you
time-
have to have a reason to believe something, and you usually would not believe it unless you had some reason to believe that it was accurate.
All right. Well, there's a lot of evidence, like who made the universe and the whole world.
Why would we assume it was a who?
There must be someone who made it.
No, why
like,
would
it
someone
cannot be
should not assume that there was a
Well,
someone?
and the other thing is people who study the origins of the universe have not come forward to say that there's a lot of evidence that someone was involved in producing it.
Right. There has not been any indication from anything we've learned through science that shows that there's any kind of a who or a person or a mind behind it.
No, but the science tells us that everything, like when we invent something, like there is a person behind it, the who invents something or who discovers something. That like it cannot be discovered by itself, but there is someone.
Right, but the difference between man-made artifacts and things you just find lying around, like rocks and sand and trees and people, is that when it comes to man-made artifacts, we have direct evidence that in many cases we can track down the actual person who made the thing. Whereas when it comes to, say, a tree, we don't have the same kind of information.
Well, okay. What do you know about the world, about this world that we live in right now? So how did it come to life?
There are things we know about that and things we don't know about that. But when it comes to things that we don't know about that, the thing to do is not just jump to conclusions and make up a story about a magical guy who did everything. The thing to do is continue investigating and find out the information.
Well, and
the
I would just note that if you want to know what evidence we do know, like what is known about the universe and the world and how those things came to exist, all of the evidence to date that would be known would be found in something called cosmology, right? So physics. There's a branch of physics that deals with this that you could look into if you wanted to know what information is currently available on that question. But one thing that's not currently available is that there's any evidence that there's a personality involved in this.
Well, you might know about the Big Bang. The Big Bang.
Sure.
Yeah, but like how could it be by itself? But there will be something behind it to do it.
Well, we don't know that because the thing about the Big Bang is that there is this period of time called the Planck constant.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, we figured out about the Big Bang by basically extrapolating backwards and figuring out that everything is basically moving away from each other at a certain rate. And by working out what that rate is and working backwards, we were able to figure out that things became more and more compressed as you go back in time. But a weird thing happens when a whole lot of matter gets very, very densely packed into a very, very small space, which is that the laws of physics as we know them don't work the same way mathematically. And because we don't have any direct experience with basically essentially different laws of physics, we aren't able to speculate about exactly what happened before that point. There are a number of hypotheses,
you could possibly think that there's something behind it. We're thinking of nothing doesn't mean like there's no one behind it.
Right, it doesn't mean there's no one behind it. The problem is there's no evidence that there is someone behind it.
Right, which is why you need like positive evidence for a God before you jump to that conclusion.
I could speculate all kinds of things, but without evidence, why would I?
Oh. There's no reason that you can possibly think of that.
Well, what I'm saying is that when it comes to physics and the people who study this and they look and examine the evidence and they understand the evidence best, they are not of the opinion at this time that someone was behind this. And so my question is, if the people who are best qualified and have the best access to the best evidence are saying that they don't currently have a reason to think there's a person behind it, why would I think that?
Right. And, I mean, when you say there's no possible way we can think of a God, well, I mean, I have a great imagination. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy. I can think of all kinds of possible creation myths, but that doesn't make any of them true. So...
I mean, do you understand what we're saying? Is it making sense to you at least? I mean, I'm not asking if you agree with us, but do you at least understand what we're describing?
I'm still not.
I couldn't understand. You got cut off.
Are we breaking up?
It's a little bit. The connection's a little bad. I'm just getting sounds. I'm not even getting.
Yeah, I'm getting real choppy.
It's like
the connection is bad.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Safi.
I'm very sorry because I would have loved to continue this conversation, but we would have to get this line fixed.
Yeah, this isn't working too well. I mean, it could be that he's calling all the way from London, and the internet relay could be unpredictable between here and there. So I guess we're going to go to Jamar, who was originally our first caller. So give me a sign when that comes up. And let's see, did we finish talking about the Planned Parenthood thing?
I think I was going to talk about this.
You were going to read something.
Archbishop says he didn't know it was criminal to have sex with children. The St. Louis Archbishop, embroiled in a sexual abuse scandal, testified he didn't know in the 1980s whether it was illegal for priests to have sex with children, according to a released court deposition. Archbishop Robert Carlson, who was chancellor of the Archdiocese of Minneapolis and St. Paul at that time, was deposed as part of a lawsuit against the Twin Cities Archdiocese and the Diocese of Winona, Minnesota. In a video released by St. Paul law firm Jeff Anderson and Associates, the Catholic Archbishop is asked whether he had known it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a child. Quote, "I'm not sure whether I knew it was a crime or not," unquote. Carlson responded, quote, "I understand today it's a crime," unquote. When asked when he first realized it was a crime for an adult, including priests, to have sex with a child, Carlson, 69, shook his head, quote, "I don't remember," he testified.
So,
I mean,
I'm not going to blame Christianity in general for this guy's problems, but I am going to say that that theists will call all the time and say, how can you understand the difference between right and wrong if you don't believe in a God, right? Because all the basis of right and, of understanding morality ultimately comes from a divine being who tells us, like, Hamish called in for the last 2 weeks, and he repeated this line a whole bunch of times. And I guess Matt wound up thinking that Hamish was trolling us. I'm not sure.
Right.
But this is a common argument. And the problem is that when you allegedly get your right and wrong from this decree, that somebody just says, oh yeah, this is what I say is good, and this way is what I say is bad. When the God isn't talking directly about a specific situation, that type of moral reasoning prevents you from making intelligent decisions. Like, is it okay to have sex with a child when you are in a position of power over that child?
Even if you aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like...
Of course, even if you aren't.
So
but I mean, it's
messed up.
especially horrible when
Right.
they're under, when you have some kind of power over them.
Yeah,
Although, as an adult, you automatically have some kind of authority and power over kids. That is coercive and manipulative, and that's not okay.
Yeah, and I just can't believe that. I mean, it almost in my head seems to be an irrelevancy, because it's like, so not knowing it was illegal would be the reason you think it's okay? I mean, like there's nothing in your head that said maybe this would be problematic even if it's legal?
Yeah, like there is a difference between legal and ethical, and people should keep that in mind.
Sure, but you would think that something like sex with a child would be pretty straightforward in someone's head.
Right.
And what was really interesting too is the idea that people were writing, and there is nothing in the Bible about age restrictions on sexuality.
No, there isn't. And I mean, in a lot of cases,
wow.
There are direct commands in the Old Testament to make off with young girls as spoils of war, who, girls who are young enough to be virgins.
Yeah.
Because, you got to be sure.
Yeah, it's just interesting how much...
and save them up to be your wife.
How much criticism I think Islam takes for young women being married, or even children being married off, and yet Christianity.
Justified,
yeah. I'm not saying that it shouldn't. I'm just saying that it's just interesting to me that Christianity has no restrictions on it, and yet no one seems to turn around and point that out.
Right.
It's like you may not be taking advantage of it in a broad way in the U.S. because it wouldn't be legal, but. I mean, in some Christian cults, they do find out that this is going on, that they're marrying off these girls at a super young age. And from a biblical perspective, this is perfectly acceptable. There is no restriction on it.
Okay. Let's get back to calls. We are going to Jamar, who was our first caller. And how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I hope the connection holds up this time. Sorry that I assumed you were playing music at me. It turned out it was technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's fine. So, I want to talk about Islam for a minute. I got into a debate with one of my friends on Facebook last night. And, okay, so he posted a photo set. The photos have, like, captions on them, and it says, there are well over 1 billion Muslims on this planet. If Islam was really about violence, y'all be dead now. Stop letting your TV and newspaper tell you who to hate. In response, I said, the point is not that all Muslims are bad. Many Muslims are very sane and acceptable people. The point is that Islam, taken as a set of ideas, is very toxic. To criticize Islam is not to criticize all Muslims. It's simply attacking a set of ideas. And then we basically went on to banter a little, and he said something that really surprised me, because it's not the way I would expect a theist to respond. So I linked to him like a bunch of verses in the Quran that were horrible, like sex, slavery, and stuff. And he basically said, and in response, he posted a whole bunch of Quranic verses that were evil as well. And he was like, look, pointing out things that speak against the Quran is not helping your case. This is not what we all believe, and yada yada yada. So I was just wondering how do I respond to somebody who knows that there's toxic things in his religion and doesn't care?
That's a tricky one.
Well, we get
And
the same thing with Christianity, though. I mean, wow,
Right.
have we seen this before? You know?
Yeah. The thing, okay, so your call went in a different direction than I was expecting.
In a very positive direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have spoken to a lot of ex-Muslims, and when I talk about the fact that bigotry against Islam does exist, I am taking a page straight from these people, like ex-Muslims of North America, who, being of a certain racial origin and background, and having been raised in Islam, often find themselves facing the same kind of bigotry that actual current current Muslims deal with. And there were actually, I remember news stories right after 9/11 where I believe Sikhs were attacked in New York. People who are not related to Muslims at all because they look like them.
Yeah, okay.
So I would be aware that this is a thing that happens. But Islam is a religion that is full of a lot of terrible bullshit. Like a lot of other religions. And I'm not clear from what you said whether this guy is aware of the terrible things that are in his book and says, well, yeah, but I mean, what exactly did he say as dismissing that? Like, did he say, oh, I don't follow those verses, or what else?
He said, and I'm looking at the comments right now, he said, finding things that talk down upon Islam from the internet are easy. LOL. Does not mean that they are what we believe or believe are true. He said, but don't worry, bro. I'll get you a copy of the Quran. We can sit down together and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I would ask him, okay, why don't you take those things seriously? That's exactly the same question that I would ask of any Christian. I mean, you know, I would take a specific verse that you think is really bad, and there is no shortage of them, and say, do you agree that that's true? And then, you know, or this is a correct way to behave. And if he says, no, it isn't a correct way to behave, then you could maybe point out, then you don't really get your morality or your information about the reality of the universe from this book. You are filtering it through your modern experience, which has nothing to do with that book, and you're just picking and choosing the parts that agree with what you already want to think, right?
Yeah, even though I've repeatedly said throughout this thread, me and him, this banter we had, that I'm not against Muslims as people, just Islam. I'm pretty sure in response to that, he would just conflate anti-Islam with bigotry against Muslims.
Okay, well, he's wrong. They are two different things that are often go hand in hand, and I don't want to whitewash that, because there are a lot of people who are like, I'm just engaging in innocent criticism of bad doctrine, you know, but we should kick all Muslims out of the country and firebomb Muslim countries without regard to whether the civilians have actually committed terrorist acts. Like, those are things that do go on, but there is still a difference. There is still a big space between pointing out that there are big problems with verses in the Quran and that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I understand that. I have no question about that. It's just that I'm pretty sure sometime this week, we're gonna have some sort of discussion about Islam. We're gonna sit down and go through the Quran and just have a rational discussion. But I just want to know, like, what can I possibly say, if anything, to get him to see that Islam.
I would just ask, like, show him the verses that concern you and ask him, what does this mean to you? Like, when you're reading, like when I'm reading it, here's what it means when I read it. But clearly for you, this means something very different. So can you explain to me what it means to you and how you arrive at that? Just try to see, like, how he deals with these issues that, I mean, I'm assuming that you don't think that he's the type of person that ethically would agree with the ideas that you have a problem with in the book. And so you're kind of looking at it saying, well, you don't seem like the type of person that would support these ideas, but here are the ideas, and they sound really horrendous. Can you explain to me, how do you reconcile in your head being the good person that I know you are and saying that you subscribe to this book that seems to me to be clearly espousing these thoughts that are toxic? And just let him explain how that reconciles in his head, and just see what he says and respond to it at that point.
And also, if he's going to be hung up on any and all criticism of Islam is automatically anti-Muslim bigotry, I would try to turn that around and have a discussion with him about something else that you could both agree on, like Christianity.
Yeah.
Don't bring it down to verses in the Quran. Like, focus on, like, bring up some of your favorite evil Bible quotes, of which there are also many, and ask him if he finds it acceptable to analyze the Bible and morally evaluate the things that the Bible says, and then maybe use his answers as kind of a jumping off point to compare the two conversations, and ask why one of them is off limits.
Right.
It's funny that you say that, because right after the first comment I made on his photo set, he immediately responded by saying, to take the religion of Christianity as a set of ideas is dangerous. So he concedes that Christianity is evil and bad, but he doesn't concede that Islam is.
So look, you have an opening with him. You both don't like Christianity, so use that as a place to come together and hug and share a moment where you both are on the same page, and then work your way out from there. See?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's just okay. So one of my main talking points against Islam is that groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda sort of subscribe to this very conservative, very literal translation of Islam, and I fear that me saying that will come off to him as every Muslim is just like ISIS, or every Muslim supports ISIS, and I'm just not sure that I can frame it in such a way where I can sort of dispel that notion.
Well, one, I'm not sure that's really your best talking point if you want to reach him. So maybe consider not using that unless you think you have a way to, again, achieve common ground with him. Like, presumably he doesn't agree with ISIS either in their beliefs or their tactics. Right. And so you could, I mean, if I were in that position, like, I'd be talking to, let's say, the Westboro Baptist Church who hate gay people, or the awful clergy in Uganda who push through these laws that gay people it should be legal to murder them. Right. And I wouldn't necessarily try to tar all Christians with that brush, but I would maybe talk about this as a way of getting Christians to agree, it's not good enough to just have faith, because I believe those Ugandan ministers have as much faith as you do. There has to be some kind of framework, some kind of basis for reasoning about right and wrong, in addition to the God said this and so it's true position.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of, I don't know. All right, I guess that's good for now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with your point that, extremist religious terrorism that is specifically Muslim is a big problem, and it's something. It's one reason why there's an especial motive to get people to understand that these holy books aren't so great. I'm just saying, be careful about using that as your point, because it will in some ways just help him put up a wall and say, oh, this guy is characterizing me in a way by saying I believe something that I don't. So if your goal is to communicate with him, then maybe don't put it in those terms.
Okay. All right, this is cool. Let's see. And how do I sort of voice that specific beliefs translate into actions without again, like how do I get him to see that beliefs actually matter, and that while he may not be bigoted, he may not approve of what ISIS is doing, etc. But how do I get him to see that
you can use
other people
you can use Christians as an example. When we get Christian callers, we'll get all kinds of weird interpretations of things. Like there's times when I've seen Matt, call out slavery in the Bible, and a person on the phone will say, it's not in there. And Matt will say, yes, it is. And in fact, it says XYZ, and the person will say, no, it doesn't say that. And so Matt will open the Bible and he will read it to them. This is what well, you're taking it out of context. Okay, can you explain the context to me then? Like, what is the context where this is okay? And then you'll have another Christian who will call in and you'll say, there's slavery in the Bible. And they'll say, yes, but it was a nice slavery and it's okay. So these people have these ways that they believe these verses translate, what they believe that God is telling them through these verses, and they will take that and, like you're saying, one of them goes one direction with it, one of them goes another direction with it, but the reason they're going in two different directions with the same verses is that their beliefs are driving them in different directions. So one of them does not believe that their God would say that slavery is all right, and so they go a certain way and say, no, slavery is wrong, and if the Bible is talking about slavery, we just don't understand it because it can't be advocating slavery. And then somebody else reads it and they say, well, this clearly seems to be advocating slavery, and so slavery must be okay under these circumstances because God said it's okay.
Yeah, and also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In a lot of cases, it will, when a theist that you're talking to runs out of answers, he will circle back to the faith answer, which in theistic minds trumps everything, where they're going to say, well, I can't pretend to understand why this verse makes sense or is correct, but I have faith that God knows what he's doing, and so I'm certain of it. And at that point, it really brings it, although they're trying to be objective by saying that God is telling them to do this, you really just kind of have to come back to, well, I don't agree with that, because saying you have faith is not a trump card that just ends the discussion. It's like, oh, well, you believe this thing and you don't have any reason for believing it, so I'm just going to say you're wrong and I don't need a reason because that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but when it comes to a demonstration of how people act on their beliefs, right, you can have liberal Christians, for example, who will allow gays to be married in their churches. And then you have conservative Christians who are doing everything they can to fight gay marriage, right? They don't even want to allow it as legal, let alone in their church. They don't even want to allow anybody else in society to do this because their religion, they believe, is driving them to ban this in society for everyone. And then you have the same people who have the same book in those pews, who also call themselves Christians, who are performing gay marriages right there in their church. So it's what they believe about it does motivate action, right? So if a person interprets it a certain way and they think that this is what God is saying should be done, they are going to act on that, but you can't predict. I want to say, I don't know if Jeff D made this up or if that's just where I first heard it, but I think he's the first time I heard somebody talking about the idea of handing somebody a gun or handing a bunch of children a pop gun, and sometimes it shoots caps and sometimes it shoots bullets, and you don't know when it's going to shoot what, and you just give it to a bunch of people or kids or whatever and you let them play with it. And that's kind of what these books are like, right? They have these ideas and you're telling people God is telling them this. And for some people, it may just be a cap. It goes off and they marry a couple of gay people in their church. And then for somebody else, it's a bullet. And they end up fighting to strip people of their rights through all of society and, you know, executing people in other countries. And it's, I mean, you have these horrific results from this same set of verses because people believe God is talking to them.
Right. The notion of faith is itself harmful, even if in not every individual case it leads to harmful consequences. The problem is
there's still bullets in the gun.
Yes. That's what I mean. Glorifying the idea that it's okay and even praiseworthy to believe something without understanding the foundation or without having good reasons for believing is dangerous.
That's a really good analogy, the cap gun.
Yeah, I didn't make it up, and I think I first heard it from Jeff, and I don't know if he's the person that invented it or if he's just the first person I heard it from, but it's not original with me, but yeah, it is a good example of how these books are dangerous, even though you can find situations where somebody is believing it and not hurting someone. That doesn't mean that it's not dangerous.
Right. Well, best of luck with your conversation, Jamar. And if you need some more sympathetic people to get eyes on your debate, you should consider joining the Atheist Experience official discussion group.
Yeah, go for it.
Which goes by that name, and you could just look it up.
And I bet if you go to the blog for this show entry, you'll see people commenting on this call, and you can probably bounce ideas off of them too.
Right. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
See ya.
See ya.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to take Modesto from the UK is our next caller, it looks like.
Sure.
And meanwhile, let's see. What happened that was interesting this week? I wrote a blog post, which
Go for it.
is a rare thing for me these days. And I'm kind of sad about that. I miss blogging, so I actually wrote a big, full, meaty blog post talking about stuff. And what I was talking about specifically was some puzzles that I used to read when I was a kid about a place called the Island of Knights and Knaves, where... And I have some links on the blog post if you would like to read and solve some of these puzzles yourself, because they're really entertaining. But the idea is that on this island, everyone you meet is guaranteed to be either a knight who always tells the truth or a knave who always lies. And the nature of the puzzles is that they'll say some things and you have to figure out what they are. But I was using that as a way of talking about religious apologetics, because often they will overgeneralize things in a way where they will, like, if you really dig into what the argument is that they're making, they're really implying that everyone is either a knight or a knave, because they'll say things like, you'll see really bewildering arguments like, oh, there was this old city mentioned in the Bible, and people didn't know it existed, but then archaeologists found it. So guess that proves that the Bible's reliable. And what they're saying is, because the Bible has said one true thing in it, every single thing it ever said must be true.
Yeah.
So I thought that was entertaining. And
no, that's a good point. I mean, and yeah, it is. It's a lot of black and white thinking, I think, that comes out of, especially the more conservative sects of religion. I'm going to go that route.
So, yeah, freethoughtblogs.com/AXP is where you can find that. Modesto, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hello, first-time caller. Just wanted to ask your thoughts on street epistemology. It's a YouTube video that I'm watching where an individual wearing a GoPro just sits down and talks to people for 5 minutes.
That's actually Anthony's site, right?
Yeah, Anthony.
Anthony, he's coming to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we are in favor of him then.
Yeah, I've worked with him a little bit, and yeah, it's an interesting project.
And I found his talks to be really interesting, and the whole street epistemology thing to be really really cool. And
does he argue with people, or does he
has
just
discussions
give
and
lectures?
he asks them questions. It's like very Socratic, and he breaks it down, and then afterwards, sometimes what he'll do is he'll go back through and sort of critique his own discussion. So it's kind of interesting.
What position does he generally take?
He just asks questions.
He doesn't. He uses the Socratic method, so he doesn't actually ask any questions. And matter of fact, he doesn't like to give off any answers at all, unless at least after he breaks down some of the other person's beliefs. And really, it's just he listens to their belief, their statement. He gets them to restate that statement, and he rephrases it in his own words, and then after that, he then gets them to hear what he said, and then they're like, "Oh, no, that's not what I meant."
It's a very high level of communication that he's using. I mean, it's a way. I mean, from a communication standpoint, which that was one of my areas of study, he's doing everything right. He's saying, "You tell me what you're saying, and then I'm going to tell you what I heard. Right. You tell me if that's what you're saying. Did I hear you right?"
Right, but it sounds like he's trying to trick people with some sort of cross-examination.
He's trying to make sure that they both agree, that they're both in agreement about what the message is.
Okay. But how can they know if they agree on anything if he is not presenting in a position?
No, agree on what they've said.
Oh, agree on what they've said.
Right. He's only interested in what they're believing, and he's examining their beliefs. And so he does this communication thing where he tries to communicate as clearly as possible with the people. And he's very, very polite about it. Like, he's super, super considerate in the conversation.
I have to say, if I were in that situation in person, I would find it a little bit obnoxious because I would assume there was some sort of agenda going on, and I would be frustrated if, I've had calls like this where the callers actually would try to lead me down.
No, he's not going anywhere with it. There's no clinch. Because he never quits asking questions. There's never any point where he stops and says, "Oh, gotcha." It's like, it would be like if you were telling somebody about something they'd never heard of. And so they're just asking you questions, and they're saying, "Oh, well, that sounds interesting. So are you saying that it's like blah, blah, blah?" And you're like, "No, it's not quite like that. It's like this." And like if someone had a real legitimate interest in something that you were telling them, and they were not familiar with it, because he treats their beliefs as though this is your belief and it's the first time I'm hearing it. And so he really does sort of ask them about it like a person who has an interest in learning what this person believes. And so but it's interesting because it does go down some weird things because like we run into on the show, a lot of times people haven't thought about their beliefs at a deep level. They're interesting conversations, and it's an interesting way to go about it. And he's I just want to say he's extremely considerate when he has these conversations.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm just wondering what people get out of the videos. Like, I don't know, when we have discussions on the Atheist Experience, like, we are definitely learning about people's beliefs, but at the same time, like, we
have a position,
state our point of view.
Well, and this is what's interesting. In the one thing that I worked with him on, it wasn't scripted in the sense that he wrote it, but it was an actual dialogue that he had in text, and so I performed the voice for the person on the other side. And he did it in a verbal context for this text exchange. And what was interesting is that I had to keep voicing this person's responses, and she was getting very frustrated, but also kind of making assumptions that he disagreed with her, even though he had never said that he disagreed with anything she said. He was just asking questions, and they weren't like rude, or there was nothing nasty about it. He was being very kind and just saying, and so what do you think about this? And so what I hear you saying is that. And she would just be very, very, almost get angry and defensive sometimes about just about the idea that if someone's questioning me, they must necessarily be criticizing me. And it was like he never did that. It wasn't like a motivated set of questions. It was just a very inquiry-style dialogue. But people sometimes get really freaked out about it because they're not used to being questioned at all.
Right.
And Anthony does use, he read Peter Boghossian's book, How to Create an Atheist, and in it he makes some, it's not a bad book, he does say some bad things, he takes a little bit of liberty with his statements, I guess, but the street epistemology is a direct from that book, and he uses the logic and the Socratic method based on that. And I think Anthony does also still use a little bit of he has an agenda, but his agenda is ultimately to get the person to think and actually. So I believe this, and then it's like, okay, well, give me your best shot. I'll listen to it, and then he'll restate it, and they're like, well, no, that's not really what I believe. I'm like, well, you just said that. Okay, he gets them to actually think about what they're stating instead of just regurgitating something that their priest or their whoever they're listening to.
Yeah, the conversation is good because what happens is they have these apologetic scripts that they're used to, and when we've seen it on the show, and yes, we're a little bit more confrontational, but I think
Yes.
that what happens even when he does it in a more mild way, you get these interesting conversations because the person comes off script. They don't know how to respond to these questions because they, and so you get these really interesting conversations.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you say he's going to be coming here?
I think Steve said he was coming to talk. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly when or what that was about. I just know I saw heard his name.
Out and start announcing it because
Yeah.
I'm sure you've got people's curiosity up, and if you're local to
And
Austin,
watch me. I probably said something completely wrong, misheard something, and now I'm like, everybody wants to go see it.
But for anybody who's curious, our lecture schedule is the second Sunday of every month. Is that right?
It's posted at our website.
Go to Atheist Community, atheist-community.org, and you will find out.
Yeah, and search for lectures, and you'll find them.
All right.
I was also hoping I could possibly do a plug.
Real quick.
Military associations and atheists and freethinkers, MAF.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
for military members. It's free to join, and
they're a good group.
They're basically a humanist organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's see. It is now 5:30, which would have been the cutoff time at the old studio. We spread out a little more here, but we are going to stop asking for new people to Skype in. So if you haven't got your name on the list already, sorry, try again next week.
Yeah, because we have a bit of a load still left.
Right. But we will finish talking to other people who are already on the line, starting with Matthew in Adelaide. And in the meantime, I'm out of material.
It's interesting because we can see, the questions that the control room has up next to the callers, and
Right,
like
so
I'm
it's
reading the
tempting to
question,
just-
and I look at that and I'm like, the way they've worded it. Now, don't get me wrong, because the question as they're translating it may not be exactly what the caller asks.
Yes.
That's not always the case. But when I'm reading this particular question, my thought is, how in the world are we supposed to answer this?
Yeah, right. I don't know. Matthew, are you there? Matthew.
Can we talk to Matthew in, what is it, Adelaide?
Yes. I don't know what
Hello,
state
guys.
that's in.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hello,
is that
Matthew.
Matthew?
Oh wow, nice to be on.
Okay.
Okay. Where is Adelaide?
Adelaide's in South Australia, so
okay.
between Perth and
That's way out.
Sydney on the east coast. We're in the south central. North of us is Darwin, Alice Springs in the middle, where the Uluru, where the Ayers Rock, and then we're in the south, so South Australia.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, g'day.
G'day.
Very thorough.
As you guys know, Matt, we had Aaron, Matt, and Seth recently travelled to Australia
heard,
and New
yes.
Zealand.
Yep.
And well, obviously I missed them a bit. It was disappointing. They kind of went right over my overhead. To Aaron and Matt went to Perth, so we missed them a bit. But really appreciate what you guys do, and you're it's awesome. I just wanted to thank you in that before I kind of share my situation.
Okay.
I guess it's just we are more of a secular country in some ways, but we have pockets of just, I guess things where just I guess I call them like baffle zones, just where things just
Sure.
baffle the bits. And I just wanted to kind of I guess figure out a bit more about what I was believing for years. I'm a previous Christian, and it's just one of those. I was part of what I consider now a cult. It was an ex-Pentecostal leader.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Did you speak in tongues or anything?
I did, well, it was at one stage about 13, 14 years of age. just had a crack at it, thinking that I was thinking I knew what I was doing.
Okay.
And
in your defense, I would say you knew what you were doing just as much as anybody else who was speaking in tongues.
yeah, exactly. I think when I was the dangers of it was they always looked at every other religion, even in Christianity religion, and probably more even internally, just questioning it like as if we're not part of the rest of the Christians.
Sure, that's not uncommon.
And that's something that
we're special snowflakes.
Yeah.
And I actually left the church, and even my dad had ups and downs with challenges. And I guess it was almost like we were always a struggling Christian. And a lot of people, the dangers I think of religion in general, and especially what I was going through with Christianity, was just that it's almost so unnatural to the human element, and it's just the way we operate. And it's just something that I guess is just free to say, because it's not something that you can almost scared to say, because it's become you're seen as a heathen or a horrible person because you want to go with what you want to do. And I'm not saying illegally or hurt other people.
No, I understand.
Just the natural way we operate as humans.
Yes.
And the way we kind of process and get to figure out ourselves. I want to talk to you, especially. It's awesome to speak to you two guys. You guys, Tracie, you're just so awesome, and Russell, look, I just want to. You personally, mate, have been really, some of the stuff you said has just really hit home to me, and
stop it.
Makes sense to me. But Tracie, when I think about some of the stuff you've talked about in particular, I just had a horrible teenage years, and it was just some of the stuff that was about going through my puberty stages and stuff like that. And I just think about, and I feel for a lot of teenagers that go through just dealing with that. And I just wanted to ask you, when people still say it's just what's the word I'm looking for here? Just the process of relationships, and just why the people use God as a love thing, a love connection, or is that something that is come up? Is that what's the word? I'm trying to get my. I had this question earlier, so it's basically just: is it something that is a emotional tool, or is that something? Do you think there was generally something from the past?
No, I think religion uses emotion very heavy-handedly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I've done some reading about cult tactics. I mean, you mentioned that you thought it was similar to a cult, and like the line between a mainstream religion and a cult is something that I've sometimes been a little fuzzy on what the real difference is.
Everybody is.
But one of the things that cults do, and this has been like studied by people who are trying to mitigate their harm, is they engage in a tactic called love bombing, which is where they basically say that you are part of this group now and we love you unconditionally, and nobody else out in the world outside this cult is ever going to love you the way we do. So, I mean, it serves as a way to simultaneously give people good, happy feelings about the people in their cult, but
it was like we never read the Bible much. So it was just judging each other and questioning each other, and there was a lot of judgment in the church. We actually started crazy. The church ended up stopping communion, stopping sermons, stopping and worship, and we just sit in meetings at each other's houses and just talk about each other and judge each other and question each other.
Wow.
It went nuts. It was nuts. And when I went back to another church, I was introduced to a church from a mate I was playing tennis with here in Adelaide, and I went to his church, and it was, for a lack of a better word, a normal church. It was one of those more, dancing, music, the drums beat. It was the youthful,
Right.
One of those type of churches where actually some churches, I got another mate that didn't like that because it's too youthful music. No, let's go traditional. So when they started reading the Bible, quotes of the Bible, and it just hit me, and I started to see, well, you're all kind of you can't even figure out amongst yourselves what kind of religion. But my mate said to me, it was an interesting thought. I wanted to kind of pass you this one. No, all the religions are wrong. It's God. Religion is man-made, and God never wanted religion. And so this guy uses the Bible and uses religion to oppose religion. Can you get that one around your head? I don't understand that. That's kind of, I don't get that. My football team's the best football team, and the other football teams don't know really how to play football in this competition. So using almost like the sport's really poor, but my team's the best, and they really know, and no one else really knows. Or so, it's just got this real smell of weird. I don't get it. Please explain that to me. Where people are thinking like that.
I think the word you're looking for is tribalism.
Tribalism, but it's not even. But
no.
He's not relating.
Usually, when I see that, normally they're not using the Bible to endorse it. Like usually, what you'll have is a person who has given up on religion altogether and yet still is adhering to theism. It's rare to see somebody that's adhering to a particular holy book saying that religion itself is wrong. But
Yeah,
I have seen people who don't subscribe to any sort of organized religion, who just have their own concepts of theistic God. It's funny because there's actually a study in the UK that found higher rates of correlating mental illness among people who were spiritual but not religious. So and they were statistically significant numbers. So it's kind of an interesting thing. They didn't really go into, the study didn't talk about the causation, but it was just kind of a funny thing that wonder why.
Can you also help me out with one other thing? I guess it's just I hear from afar, listening to people that don't believe in the evolution and some of the things that just are facts and just genuine scientific facts right under our nose. And I thought, no, my mates wouldn't be like that. I thought there'd be like Christians that would. So when we discussed it, I don't believe in evolution at a macro level, and they all go through all the things that they actually believe all the stuff that's all the woo and all the crap. And I just he says he's rational. Do they choose not to look because it's right there? You can actually read it. Is it that indoctrinated?
Yeah. I mean, you
mustn't
heard.
escape that. I somehow.
Did you hear the first caller that we talked to about cosmology? Right? He's calling us asking about why we don't believe the evidence. And it's like, well, have you ever talked to somebody who actually deals in the evidence? Because if you did, then we'd be asking you why you believe this despite the evidence not supporting it, right?
Somehow I passed that, I missed it, or escaped
right.
it somehow.
So when you talk about the idea of when they're rejecting these realities and when they're rejecting all of the current evidence, yes, they don't really know it. They haven't really gone and looked at it because they don't want to. They go and they look at these apologetic versions of it, right? They're looking at the apologetic response to the evidence and considering that looking at the evidence. They don't really go to the person
So it's a presupposed idea.
Yeah, you're basically just looking at the person who's criticizing its arguments, and you're not ever going to the person who's promoting it and asking them, will you tell me what the real deal is with this evidence?
And my last question on this is just in regards to the power of just the deception. I have a buddy of mine that's doing, we've got a big festival that's happening in Adelaide, and he's a mentalist. And there was a big thing, just even literally overnight, there was Australia and India in a cricket match, and the the host, the channel had a guy that was doing a promotion within the promotion. He was a mentalist, and he predicted the score of the game and everything. And the people like us, get on the blogs and say, "Well, dude, make some money out of that," and mentalists, and you've got people that are real normal, smart people that host the shows and journalists and stuff that make it believe it. And I think we're all like kids that still want to believe in fairies sometimes. And I just think, no, it's a trick. My dad was into magic and hypnosis and stuff, but really was understood that it was a magic and it's all playing with your mind. And how much, again, is that stuff the religion use just the frailty and the easy deception of our minds? Is that something, do you think that
most of it?
Adults?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a certain amount of...
I just wanted to kind of discuss that.
Everybody's got a certain amount of superstition, and, the best thing you can do is be aware of it and try to counteract it. But, I mean, there are these situations where, like, gamblers will take this completely random event, like they won a big jackpot or something, and they were like, well, I was wearing this shirt, so the shirt is going to do it. If I just wear this shirt all the time, then I'll win more. And people come up with it is superstition. I mean, there are psychological experiments that have even demonstrated in pigeons where they dispensed food at random and the pigeons would develop these weird tics or quirks, like running around in circles and flapping one wing or something like that. So, I mean, it's a normal quirk of people's brains, and maybe it's just a happy accident for religious organizations that they can tap into that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's what they do.
Anyway.
That's what I think. That's what how now, as a person, where in most things now, I just want to be always skeptic and just have a almost go almost extreme the other way in a way, just to I guess if for nothing else, just to say, don't want to be a gullible fool.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So we're gonna move on. We got
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Cheers.
We've got 12 minutes left in the show. Well, I mean, there's no hard time limit. We're going to talk to Keith from Staten Island, but, if we're going to be out of here at a reasonable time to have dinner, which, by the way, if you're local to Austin and you would like to join us, that is at Threadgill's
North location.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we'll be there like shortly after the show, maybe 6:15 or so. And yeah, Keith coming on pretty soon, I hope.
One of them. We got a couple left.
Yeah, let's see. So I had a few more examples where religious arguments are sort of like assuming that people are all knights or knaves. One of the ones that I mentioned in this post is, C.S. Lewis's liar, lunatic, or Lord argument that apologists all seem to love. Like where if Jesus said that he was God, which it's not clear if he really said that, how much of that is just story stuff, even assuming that Jesus existed.
Yeah.
But they make the claim that if you are saying that he wasn't really God, then he must have been a serial liar who lies all the time, or someone who is crazy and everything he believes is untrue all the time.
Yeah, and the first thing they're going to do is try to convince you of the reliability of Scripture. You have to, because if you don't accept that, then this whole argument, it just seems even ridiculous before it starts. I mean, the whole premise of saying, then you don't believe what he said, and it's like, well, should I believe that anything that's recorded,
and my response to that is, Scripture, I don't have to believe that every single individual sentence in the Bible is untrue. I just have to believe that it is unreliable.
Right.
And the fact that the Bible says something tells me absolutely nothing about whether it's true or false.
Right.
Okay, Keith?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
How's it going?
Good.
I just wanted to kind of touch on this one argument. I want your thoughts on it, about when people say, I do not believe that a God exists, or I believe no gods exist. about the positive and negative aspect. I guess that's always assumed, especially from atheists. And I've been thinking a lot about this argument, and I think there's no reason to not engage in the "I believe there is no God" as far as even claiming it as knowledge. If your definition of knowledge is still justified true belief, I mean, every time atheists are defending their lack of belief, so to speak, they're justifying their belief. So I see no reason why, when someone says, "How do you know there is no God?" to justify your belief that there is no God, in a sense. And I understand both sides. I understand the side that you guys often take, and I do understand this side as well. But I see no reason why there's anybody should dodge the knowledge claim, because it's already being defended very well.
In one aspect, yes, and I've had some discussions with philosophers who think that strong position is appropriate, just because when we say we know anything, we are talking about to within the limits of our rational ability to understand things. We are extremely confident about it.
Exactly.
So I agree with that. One of the problems with arguing about the existence of God is that the notion of what God is so vague and seems to change so much from person to person. I mean, like, how many times have you heard Tracie take a call where somebody will say, I believe that there is something spiritual, and Tracie says,
yeah, what do you mean by spiritual?
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
I guess I'm not crazy about just making the bald assertion, absolutely not, there is nothing that resembles a God that has or ever will exist.
Well, that's not what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right, but here's the thing that gets me, right? This is the thing that really, I guess, irks me about the conversation, that is, in my opinion, dishonest about the conversation, is that outside of conversations with Christian apologists and theists, I never have to make that caveat. If I'm talking to my next door neighbor and I say there's no such thing as fairies, nobody questions that, right? Nobody.
True.
And unless you're, when you say, like, when you watch these Bigfoot shows, everybody's, pretty much everybody that, you're probably knowing in your life thinks that these shows are a joke. Right? And you can say that. It's such a joke. These people are so ridiculous. And nobody takes issue with it except, some weird person living in a shack somewhere. But you have these issues where it's perfectly acceptable in any other context to say this thing doesn't exist, ghosts don't exist, fairies don't exist, right? And you run up against very little opposition to it, right? Like the people that are opposing it are generally fringe or people that are kind of unsure about something. But when you get into theism, it is this hard line where unless you have 100% certainty, you cannot say you know this for sure. And it's like, really, is that how you communicate anywhere else in your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say there is a difference between colloquial usage, saying, "Oh yeah, God doesn't exist," and saying, well, because if I was going to be asked, "Can you prove that fairies don't exist?"
Right, but
I would also say
that conversation never happens unless I'm talking to religious people.
Usually not.
That's what I'm saying. I would never say that to my next door neighbor, to someone I work with. If I said fairies don't exist, not one person would say, but can you actually prove that? You only have that kind of ridiculousness in conversations with religious people.
Although that's because you don't run into a lot of people in the real world who seriously believe in fairies.
Right.
Anytime you run into...
all the same reasons we don't believe in gods. That's the point this caller is making.
I mean, but you do run into a lot of other nonsensical beliefs which aren't necessarily about gods, and people will say, like, just to throw out an example...
palm readers.
Can you prove
that...
Okay. Well, I mean...
Somebody can believe that.
Not even that far-fetched. It's like, can you prove that my alternative cryptocurrency isn't a long-term viable economic solution to everything?
Whoever asks me that, though? That's what I'm saying.
You don't have any conversations with
Right.
Bitcoin apologists. Oh, no, wait. Don't email us about that. That's not a topic for this show.
Yeah. I guess my point is I agree with you that, it's like you only have to tiptoe across these eggshells and show this kind of deference to a ridiculous belief when you're talking to religious people. If you don't show that kind of deference to other people's beliefs, like the few people that believe in Bigfoot or Loch Ness or whatever, if you step all over that, 90% of the people are like, yeah, it's ridiculous. And they agree with you, and everything is considered to be cool because you know that there's not sufficient evidence to demonstrate this thing exists, and so it's perfectly fine to say it's made up. But when it comes to God, that is out that you have to respect it, right? You have to respect it, and you have to sit there and say, like, well, I can't say for sure. And you never would do this with other beliefs that had this level of crappy evidence supporting them.
Right, and I think a lot of the problem stems from equivocation. I think Russell, you did that a little while ago without even realizing it, and that's what happens all the time. It's like they'll ask you, how do you know there is no God? And the next thing you know, they're saying, how could you be so certain and absolute? Right. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not, when you claim what you know, you're saying, as you said earlier, Russell, that you're just telling them what you know as a person. You're not claiming anything absolute or any certainty or any impossibility. You're claiming what you know. And it's the same thing, like you said, Tracie, about Bigfoot. If you have the same conversation about Bigfoot, how do you know Bigfoot doesn't exist? Based on your knowledge, how do you know? And this is justified in our everyday discourse as far as atheists go.
Yeah.
Very well.
If
conversations about atheism, more than conversations about most other topics, go deep into this notion of epistemology,
but they don't.
Is a weird conversation.
You don't usually have to have it. You only have to have conversations about epistemology when someone doesn't have enough evidence to support their position. That's when they start getting into, well, what can we know? Well, okay, we're having this conversation because you don't have evidence. But the point is, if you want to use that, I sometimes throw a little asterisk on the end of it, right? Like, I know God exists. And then there's an asterisk, and then there's a footnote with an asterisk that says, in the same way and for the same reasons, I do not believe fairies exist. So if the person is comfortable with saying that fairies do not exist, then they need to not criticize me for my saying that gods do not exist, because I use same reasoning to make that same statement. And so if they sit there and say that they do not believe in fairies, but they believe in God, they're the ones being hypocritical.
Right.
Anyway, it's getting late. No, we've had enough.
Sorry. We have another caller, and we're going to be late for dinner and coming, and we have to roll.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Claudio from Turkey, I'm sorry we saved you for last. We are going to have to make this a very brief conversation.
But we'll get you on.
You are welcome to call in next week.
If you want to talk more.
Yeah, but anyway, we will talk to you for a few minutes, and then we're headed off to Threadgills. Yeah.
So we're waiting on Claudio. That was an interesting call.
Like the big philosophical topics come up at the very, very end of the show.
It makes me so angry, though, the way that you can't speak plainly when you talk to atheists. That you have to have all these weird things that suddenly they reason in a way that they don't reason in this way in any other aspect of their life.
Yeah.
And they demand this weird, level of...
What I prefer to do, though, is steer the conversation away from this abstract philosophical masturbation. And,
thank you.
And just steer the conversation in the direction of none of that makes sense. And just, keep it on that footing.
Yeah.
Like, why would I believe anything like that?
And
Because,
and that's why people do...
Diving down that road of what knowledge really means, you are jumping into a conversation that is going to waste time and not illuminate much.
Well, I guess that's why what I'm asking them with the fairy example is, are you using knowledge yourself in the same way that you would use it in another dialogue? Would you get as offended if I didn't believe fairies exist, even though I can't demonstrate that they don't? Would it offend you on this level? And the answer is no, because they're inconsistent. They want to reason and operate one way outside their religion, and then they want to apply a whole different set of standards. They want to special plead just ridiculous levels for their religion that they just do not anywhere else.
I agree. Claudio from Turkey, you're our last caller. I'm afraid you have to make it quick. Like I said.
Go for it, Claudio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. It's a pleasure to speak with you, Tracie.
You too, Russell.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just want to share with you my experience of born in a Mormon church. Since I was kid, they teach me all this stuff and really enter in your brain. You take all these stories, all the telling of gods, and like it's something real.